Hey, howdy folks. What you're about to watch is a three-way unscripted discussion of both parts 1 and 2 of Spyfall between me and my friends. Think of it as something akin to the spoiler casts. Or if you've ever visited the Red Lightning channel, which I've made reference to in the past, think of it as a continuation of those kind of discussion videos. If you haven't checked out that channel, go ahead and click the first link in the description to look at some of our older Doctor Who episode reviews. The second link in the description, and the one being linked to in the card up there, is our collectively owned All Things Doctor Who channel. And that's important because that channel will be the one where all of the scripted and properly edited Doctor Who reviews will go for the foreseeable future. So, if these kind of videos don't do it for you and you want episodic Doctor Who reviews more in my usual style, then you should absolutely check out that channel, give it a like, and subscribe, so that you can get a whole spectrum of Doctor Who goodness from me. Without any further ado, enjoy the show.
Okay, we are live talking about Doctor Who, the season 12 premiere.
Yeah, both parts. This will be a full-on, completely in-depth discussion of both parts, and I might as well start out by saying that this will be put at the start of the video. I gave Lucy the clip to put at the beginning of this discussion. If you want the scripted, edited, properly, structured reviews of both parts, then you can find that on our other channel, which will link in the description of this video. Hopefully people will pay attention to me when I tell them to do things for once, and we'll have already watched that. So given that, either one of you goes first, and what did you think about Series 11? How hopeful or not hopeful were you coming into this pair of episodes, and were those expectations met, generally?
My enthusiasm going into this was more dead than Star Trek was in the mid-2000s.
Harsh.
That was harsh.
It was announced Chris Chibnall took over the show. I was an adamant defender of his Torchwood and Doctor Who work. And then I was just very hopeful, and I kept on defending it from the haters. And then when it finally showed up, I was heavily disappointed by almost all of the episodes. Then going into this one, I was just it just kind of felt like going to some obligation party or something.
That's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
I spent the day, just so you guys know, emotionally preparing myself to be the one person who's positive on this series for the next 10 or so weeks. I was hoping I wouldn't have to do that this time, but I'm ready. I'm willing to be the one guy who's going to bat for the Chibnall era of Doctor Who. It's going to be a long series, I get the feeling, but I can do this. I can be positive enough for the three of us, hopefully.
Now you know how I felt during the Moffat era, Nick.
I had plenty of positives to say about the Moffat era, and we'll get into those when we get into those.
I'm talking about being the only person in the room a lot of times, just being the only fan, but...
Fair enough. For those interested, we'll be talking about the Moffat era of the show very soon on Lucy's channel, so go subscribe to that too. But whatever, Lucy, go into your thoughts.
Actually, I didn't have any high anticipations for anything. I wasn't much of a fan of the Russell T Davies era, so I figured I'd probably just like the Moffat era, and that'd probably be it. I hope that the new era would be good, but it just ended up being kind of generic and just blasé, so I'm not mad about it or anything. It's just, it is what it is.
And it's interesting that you mention that with these two episodes specifically, because I feel like Spyfall takes a lot from the RTD era. A lot. It feels like something Russell could have written himself, honestly.
It takes some elements from the RTD era and Moffat era, but it just feels a bit flat a lot of the time. We'll go more into it. I really don't have anything that negative to say about it. It was passable television. It was fine. I really liked, certain elements of it and didn't like others, but we'll get to that.
I am kind of in that same boat, except with the general vibe of the whole two episodes, I enjoyed it way more. I, as have been alluded to, am the guy who really likes Series 11. I have my issues with it, because I went in with the same mindset as Edward did, which is I enjoy most of Chibnall's stuff as a guest writer for the other two showrunners. A lot of his episodes under Russell and Moffat get a lot of crap. I think they're generally pretty strong, with some exceptions. I think he, as a writer, does not know how to resolve plots very well, and that is unfortunately still true. Part of my like for Series 11 goes beyond just the quality of individual episodes, because there are some real stinkers, I think, of individual episodes. But I went into that series hoping that he would make a lot of creative choices that ended up being the ones that he made. So I felt really validated. I feel kind of weird about Spyfall because I enjoy a lot about it, and there are other parts that I feel like are just typical Chibnall weaknesses as a writer. And then there are parts which is like, the spoiler stuff, which I feel like is kind of going back on things that I liked about Series 11, and we'll get into that. As a whole, I enjoyed both episodes. I liked part 1 more than I liked part 2, but,
I was the opposite. Part 1 was pretty boring to me. Second part I found more intriguing. I think it's just because of the master. Out of these 2 episodes, I will say these are the best so far, for me anyway.
The best Chibnall episodes or the best episodes of his time as showrunner?
Probably best is the showrunner. The only one I think might be better might be Rosa, but that's it.
You know me, I'll go to bat for It Takes You Away and Demons of the Punjab until I die.
Yes, we know. But I think mainly just because this held my interest. There's just a lot happening, and I think that's why a lot of people like it. There's just so much happening on screen. It doesn't really give you time to think about anything. You can get in there and it's like, okay, that was kind of fun, and then it's over, and then you don't think about it, and then you walk away.
Yeah, it is kind of a benefit of an episode being chock full of stuff the way that this one is, because even when you do start thinking about it and stuff doesn't start connecting for you, you can still look back on individual moments and be like, yeah, that was good. I like that. And she decided ultimately not to be a part of this video. Watching these 2 episodes with Eden, that helped a lot. And especially because Edward, you can speak to this. You mentioned really not being a fan of any of the spy stuff in part 1. Eden loved that stuff. Like, I was mostly ambivalent towards it. I thought it was just a neat homage, but Eden was like really, really enthusiastic about all of the sort of James Bond elements of part 1. And it was difficult not to share her enthusiasm.
I'm alive.
You mentioned off camera that you didn't know anything about these episodes before you watched part 1, so you didn't even know that it was a spy thing. You didn't even know the title.
All I knew was that the twist at the end is that one character was the master the whole time. And if that wasn't spoiled, I may have enjoyed this two-parter a lot more, because one of the positives that I have to mention is the pacing. Since, well, it's a two-parter, so it doesn't have that rushed feel that I tend to complain about with a lot of single Doctor Who episodes.
And both parts are an hour long, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I could go for a whole season with two-parters with this pacing. I really could.
Yeah, you know me. I've never been someone who needed stories to be longer than the usual running time. It's a matter of how much individual writers want to use that time and to do what. But yeah, I'm not going to complain. Having 2-hour-long episodes was definitely not to this story's detriment, I don't think.
Yes. But the convoluted plot, on the other hand...
That's kind of something to what Lucy and I were mentioning, with just the way that it's so full of stuff. I don't think the plot gets super convoluted until part 2, where we've got the characters split up, so we kind of have 2 simultaneous plots going on. One of them, we kind of have to contrive the inclusion of Noor Khan and Ada Lovelace, who don't really contribute all that much to the plot, but it's just kind of nice to have them there. And I think they might be there for like certain thematic reasons, but you could kind of write around them if you wanted to. So that's where I think a lot of the convolutedness comes in, is fitting those 2 in.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, like, I like all of their moments together, like getting someone who's from the 19th century, putting them in the middle of World War II. And like, I love that whole conversation of like, they promised a war like this would never happen again. Like, you mean this isn't the first time this has happened? And the Doctor has to be like, yeah, things get like this sometime, but darkness never sustains. And I love that whole bit, and moments like that, and her erasing their memories. And I really like moments like that, and I like the idea that with this episode doing kind of a technophobic, like, oh no, modern technology, spying on everyone thing, I like that we have those 2 there. It's like, the inverse of that as the positive side of technology and innovation. I just wish that you could have found a way to make them impact actual plot points more. That's where it seemed like it was difficult.
Yeah, it does feel like the whole subplot with the Steve Jobs character.
Barton, yeah.
They found me.
I felt like it was almost unnecessary. I kind of wish they just would have saved him for his own episode.
It's like a triad of bad guys in this story. You've got him, you've got the Master, you've got the Kasavan, and the Kasavan are fascinating. I love them. They're great. I love it whenever this show does alternate dimensions.
And could carry their own episode. Need the Master.
That said, I like that we could still potentially do that because we haven't gotten rid of them. They're still out there.
I guess my problem with it was it did feel a bit clustered. It's like, okay, we have this subplot with the Steve Jobs. I was going to call him Steve Jobs because
his name is Barton. It's not hard to remember.
Okay, Barton Jobs.
Barton Jobs.
He has like all these mommy issues, and he's trying to like what was it? He was trying to like turn everyone into like data or something.
There are people who have problems with that plot point, like it's totally ridiculous and makes no sense. I actually love this because
Felt like I've seen this scheme before.
Well, I like it a lot because finding ways to convert human DNA into data storage is something that real-life scientists have been working on for years. It's something that's been successfully done before. I forget what exactly the exact example was, but I want to say like 2011, 2012, like a couple of years back, there's somebody who like successfully has like the collected works of Shakespeare stored inside of their body as digital information. Like this is something that the technology for this exists and is being developed as we speak. So I kind of like that as like, it sounds ridiculous, but this is actually something that we could do in a few years or decades.
Yeah, that sounds freaky. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Maybe I should have rewatched the episode for like, you share your kind of uncertainty, Lucy, about like, why does he actually want to do this?
Yeah.
Like, what's his end goal? Like, the Kasavan take over humanity as like information within a person, and then what? Like, what does he get from that? I forget what exactly he did that for.
I've only watched both episodes once. So I'll probably like rewatch them again to go like more in depth, like review maybe like year down the line. But like I said, it felt like his subplot. I just feel like, okay, I kind of like going into the whole like, okay, we're spying on people with your phones and stuff like that. But then they kind of drop it. He just kind of, okay, his plan gets foiled off screen because the doctor did something off screen. And
yeah, that's the single biggest issue with this episode, I think, which is what I mentioned, which is like Chibnall is not good at resolving the actual plots of his episodes. Chibnall is good at like a select number of things, which I happen to really enjoy. He's a decent concept guy, I think. He's good at the grounded emotional moments of characters sitting around and talking. And my favorite moments across these two episodes are those kind of moments. He's good at portraying the Doctor as a character in the way that I kind of understand them. What he's really, really bad at and has never been good at. The two closest exceptions, I think, are maybe 42 and the Silurian two-parter. Those are the closest he's ever gotten to actually concluding the story of the episode in a way that's engaging and doesn't like feel incredibly rushed. Because you're right, the Doctor comes in from off screen and is like, I solved the whole central conflict of the episode off screen. Let me explain it to you. And Chibnall just does that sort of thing way too often.
So it's where I just throw my arms up.
It's in everything. It's in his really good episodes like The Power of Three, and it's in his really bad episodes like the spiders one, the arachnids in the UK, where it's like, okay, we had a plan to get rid of these spiders, and it was pretty simple, remarkably straightforward, but oh no, there's one left. Let's just shoot it.
Going back to his gangster days of his sixth incarnation.
Which, I mean, the way that she dealt with the Master in the end was pretty gangster. That said, we've kind of been talking around him. We should probably talk about how we feel about him as a character. because I feel like him and the way he's written and his performance is kind of the make or break factor for a lot of people. Like,
Another goofy man.
honestly, well, he starts that way. He's super goofy in his last scene in part 1. I really like that he tones it down in part 2. Yeah, he's still got that kind of same energy to him that the previous masters had, but unlike them, we tried to do this thing with, especially with John Sim as the master, where it's like his manic energy sort of comes from madness and like this thing that he's got internally that's like that makes him genuinely angry, and it never really comes off that way. It comes off way too memey and way too much like he's on crack, and it's like it's too jokey. There's a line between crazy and jokey, and both of the previous masters I feel like were way too jokey. This guy, I believe, is just angry. When he has his moments of like insane energy, it's because he's very deeply angry about something. And the way that I like to think about it is because someone make this comparison on Twitter, I think, was like, I feel like for the first time since the classic series, I'm watching that guy again. Like, I feel like this guy is playing the same character that Anthony Ainley and Roger Delgado were playing. And I'd never had that with the Sim Master or with Missy.
A big Finnish master, even.
Who I still haven't listened to, so I'll take your word for it.
My thing is, I've only watched like New Who so far, so I don't know about the older masters, but I just go by it like the Doctor. Every version is going to be their own kind of thing a little bit, so I don't care if one version is more cartoony or jokey or whatever. It's more of if the performance gives me. I didn't like John at all. He just made me cringe.
John Sim is the Joker master. Missy is evil Mary Poppins.
Yeah, I feel like John Sim was really let down by the writing, because we discussed his whole introductory 3-parter somewhat recently. It was around the middle of last year when we talked about those episodes. There are scenes in that 3-parter where he's given genuinely intimidating stuff to work with, and the jokes kind of reel back for a bit, and he's allowed to give a real performance. And what really solidified it for me was the Dr. Falls, the end of Series 10. A lot of people have a problem with this master coming after Missy, because like we gave Missy basically a fully formed character arc where she had kind of a redemption. If you really think about it, that was only 12 episodes ago, and now we've got this new master here who we still don't know for sure if he's after her or before her, and I think they're being deliberately vague about that, but he's back to being evil and mustache twirly, and people feel like that was a betrayal of what we did with Missy. I would probably feel that way if I liked Missy more, and if I liked Series 10 more. But for all the flack that I'll give Series 10, and like having only watched it the once, I think the Dr. Falls is a really, really boring episode. That said, in that episode, I feel like John Sim is giving a really good performance. I don't know, Moffat is kind of able to scale down the crazy, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs elements of that character, and John Sim is actually a compelling master. But just the way that both of them were written, again, they're too memey. Like, Missy literally went around doing dabs, and like, it was too much.
Personally, I like all that. I like a little bit of cartoony. I just thought John did way too much, mostly because he was screaming a lot.
I just can't get around that the most evil thing John Sim's master did was in the end of time where he asked for lunch.
And someone made a thing that was like, this master, the Dewan master, he spent 77 years without a TARDIS. So you have to imagine that in like 2010, when the master sees everyone turn into him except for him, so like he's got to be around just on Earth during the events of End of Time, and every single person around him turns into another version of himself for half an hour.
Ah, yes. This was good. This was a good time.
The master specifically makes it so that it happens to humans. So he's going to be like, what the heck? Oh, right. Depending on where in the timeline he is, because he could also be before the John Sim Master. Depending on where he is, he could either be like, oh, right, I remember when I did this. Or he could be like, what the hell is happening? But yeah, long story short, his performance is great. The way he's written is great, I think. Kind of makes the whole story that scene where he tells the doctor to kneel, and he's like, "Use my name." And it's like that's great. Like we've never gotten a scene like that between the two of them, I don't think.
Kneel before Zod.
I like how like disturbed he acts.
Yeah, again, and like this comes in especially with the last scene. Once you get the context of he found out about this thing, we don't know what it is because of course we've got to do another mystery box. But whatever this timeless child thing is, it made him viscerally angry. It drove him to a genocidal rage, and he plays that anger really well. Like he's not over it. He's still got this unresolved, like, I despise the universe right now, and I love that vibe to him. It's great.
Getting back to people have a problem with like the whole story arc with Misty and stuff. As somebody that actually really loves that character, because I still like the jokey side and stuff, but I like that she was also dark. I feel like she's the best of both worlds for me personally. I mean, when she died, it was fine. It was kind of tragic because now this next version is going to be something else. And, it doesn't matter. Her storyline or her story arc got tragically cut by herself. So I don't feel like there's a problem there. People keep complaining, "Oh, we can't bring a new master in because it ruins her story." No, it doesn't. The whole point was she didn't get to finish it.
Yeah, just in the context of that episode, the point is that it's kind of tragic, and I guess you could say it only lends more tragedy to the notion that, like, of course they have the throwaway line and they're like, "Don't think you'll regenerate, I gave you the full blast," and we can be like, yeah, but you always say that, assuming that this does come after Missy chronologically, then yeah, you're right, Lucy. It does just add to the tragedy of that arc, which is that like she cuts herself off, like he cuts themselves off from being able to grow as a person. And this ties into my whole read on the Master as a character, which is a very singular read that I don't think anyone else shares, and it mainly just has to do with me watching Survival one time and thinking, which is that like the Master is literally an animal basically, in that they're a slave to their impulses and they're a slave to their nature. Even if they really want to grow as a person, they can't. Like they won't let themselves. Even if Missy does sort of have an arc, she changes into someone who's just like, I can't. I've got this instinct in me to cause chaos and destroy things and be this force of nature, and I just have to follow through on that impulse. And it makes every version of the Master from the beginning to the end really tragic. This is direct wording taken from the edited review, which I don't know if it's going to go up before or after this, but I like that we have a Master not written by Moffat, which means for the first time in years, their dialogue isn't carpet bombed with innuendos like every single female that Moffat has ever written. Like, again, having sat down and watched these two with Eden, she picked up on a lot of sexual tension between these two, which, I mean, sexual tension is kind of inherent to every Doctor-Master relationship, like all of them going back to Ainley and Pertwee, I mean Delgado and Pertwee, but yeah, no. Like, he literally has her kneel down in front of him and call her master, so...
Yeah, let's not go there.
It makes their relationship, like, so infinitely fascinating because they are always friends, and they are always kind of coded as lovers, and they are always enemies. And there's just so many different layers that makes it really hard to put any kind of human label on the relationship that they have. Like, I almost don't care if they go from being chummy to being at each other's throats like moment to moment, because that's just the complexity and like alien nature of the relationship that they have. You kind of can't even hold it to human standards.
Also, I think sometimes when people say, oh, they have like a thing going on, I think it's this, a male character and a female character in a room together, so therefore they have sexual tension.
Right, but with these two, again, it's even when they're both males. Like, I'm not going to pretend that Tennant and Sim didn't have, like, a lot of tension of that variety going on.
I think they had more, to be honest.
Possibly, yeah, probably. Again, this is just like a thing with the two of them.
We did learn that in the classic serial, The Mind of Evil, the Master's greatest fear is the Doctor laughing at him.
Yeah. I love him. I think he's great. I hope that whenever we resolve this timeless child thing, we bring him back. And that said, I want us to resolve this thing within this series. Don't pull a Moffat and be like, this series story arc is actually just a lead up to another mystery box that we'll deal with in Series 13. And then that will be something that we resolve in Series 14.
Or it's I'll explain later.
My thing is, I'm okay with like a storyline going across multiple seasons. I don't think that's going to happen here. I think they'll have a reveal by the end, but I never just got that idea like, oh, you just have to wrap everything up in the first episode or like the first season. It's like, it's ongoing story. Just let it play out. And then if it comes out bad, complain.
I'm always torn with this show because I know that Public Enemy #1 with you two, Mr. TARDIS, mentioned a long time ago, like a couple of years back, before Chibnall took over, that he wanted Doctor Who to embrace more actual long-form storytelling in terms of changes with characters and the universe that stick and have repercussions for like years down the line, because his perception, and I think a lot of people's perception of the show, is kind of like, it doesn't really do long-term character arcs. I sort of disagree, because I think you can track a character arc from the 9th Doctor, progressing through 10 to 11 to 12, all the way to where we are now, that mostly tracks across the series and is a natural growth for this character.
Forgetting about the alien invasions, despite them making their way onto national news TV almost every single time.
That sort of thing I agree with. Like, I think Doctor Who is generally better than it is given credit for as far as advancing characters and letting that be a long-form narrative. Like I never used to appreciate just how much Amy grew as a character across her 3 seasons on the show. You look at those 3 seasons and it's like, man, she really did naturally grow up as a character, and we got to see that growth happen, and it felt natural and it felt right, and that was a real story. But you're right, Edward, the stuff where it's like, things will happen like on Earth, or institutions of the show's universe will have stuff happen to them, and then we'll just kind of go back on it. That stuff, I think, is a valid complaint. I'm going to give my hot take, which may or may not be a hot take, which is that this show has never been particularly good at long-form plot storytelling. Like, never. We've had 2 story arcs across the whole 11 seasons that I think have actually worked as story arcs, and that's The Cracks in Series 5. What was the other one? I want to say The Missing Planets in Series 4? I don't know. Even that might be a stretch. Because the way that this show does story arcs, such a problem that's unique to this show, and I kind of don't know how you fix it without just dropping story arcs entirely like Series 11 did, which is another thing that I really liked about Series 11. I went into that series saying, I hope Chibnall doesn't feel the need to do a story arc, and then he didn't do one, and I was really happy about that.
I think the problem is that the creatives behind this show are a bit too afraid to think outside the box. They're too attached to sticking to the formula that Russell T Davies started the new show out. The central main companion that isn't from present-day Earth. It's like almost every companion, aside from Jack and River, is from present-day Earth. I'm sick of it.
Again, Eden and I were watching this episode going like, I understand why you don't make full companions out of real-life historical figures, but what I wouldn't give to see the series that's just Norrin Yat Khan and Ada Lovelace and 13th Doctor on adventures. That would be so rad. But I understand you run into a bit of trouble if you're like, I have to portray this real-life historical figure who may have real-life relatives who are still alive and might object to the way that they're portrayed if they're there for more than an episode. And, like, you have to give them character conflicts and stuff. But, like, I don't care. They don't have to be a real historical figure. Just bring someone from the future or someone from the past, like anything.
But before we go any further, we have a comment. Apparently, there's a theory going around that this master was actually a good person, but he found out something happened in Gallifrey, and that's what turned him back to evil.
Yeah, that's what I like. That's what I like about that whole twist that he destroyed Gallifrey again, because it takes the whole rest of the episode
and it makes you question like his whole demeanor and his whole attitude, where it's like, oh man, like the rest of the episode kind of made you think, oh, it's just the master being the master and he's just crazy because crazy. But now it's like, no, we know there's one thing that he found out that like shook him to his core, and it kind of broke him. Like he reads like a broken person. So maybe that's right. Maybe, again, this is post-Missy and they were really trying to change, and whatever they found out was just so personally damaging to them that they just couldn't deal with it. The problem is now, whatever the heck the Timeless Child is and wherever this arc is going has to live up to that. And as we've established, Chibnall is not great at concluding things. So let's hope that he's better at concluding an arc than he is at concluding a singular episode.
Yeah. We'll see. Like, I've never seen him do a whole arc, so there's a possibility there, so I don't know.
Sort of, oh, well, would you look at that? Sorry, hello, everyone. And to be honest, I'm glad Gallifrey got destroyed. To be honest, Day of the Doctor really annoyed me when they saved Gallifrey. I mean, they saved it and literally did nothing with it. Okay, RJH Productions, agreed. I agree with you on that front. I'm super, super torn about the handling of this whole thing, because people who are new to this kind of formatted discussion, I apologize. If you haven't noticed, of the three of us, I'm the biggest chatterbox and I tend to monopolize a lot of time. I apologize profusely to both of you. I feel like I'm really steamrolling you guys, but I gotta get this out, which is I'm completely split down the middle with this decision. I don't know how to feel about it. Because on the one hand, yeah, you bring back Gallifrey and Day of the Doctor, and like, that's the 50th anniversary of the show. That's bringing a major staple of the series for 10 years almost to a close. And it's really cathartic in the moment, and then you don't do anything with it. And then you bring it back in Hellbent, and it's really interesting what we do there. It's a very controversial episode that makes a lot of, I'd say, bold choices. But I'm always stuck in this place where I'm not sure if Gallifrey would be really interesting as a setting to keep around, and it would be a really interesting notion to bring more Time Lords that aren't the Doctor or the Master into the show. Like, I'm always astonished that this show has been back on air for almost 15 years and we have not brought Ronnie back. That astonishes me that has not happened yet. Bring Gallifrey back and then we don't do anything with it. And I'm still not sure if it's actually an interesting place or not. I don't know if you can actually make a story set on Gallifrey interesting, because no one's really tried more than once.
Two things to say about that. The first problem with Gallifrey was a mistake that was made in classic Doctor Who, starting with the Deadly Assassin, where they made Time Lord Society too similar to Britain. Like, it's supposed to be this vague society has been around for thousands of years, and they just happen to be super, super contemporary Britain in space. And the second problem is that they probably did nothing with Gallifrey being brought back, probably because of the motivation behind bringing it back in the first place. That they thought of it being a good way to have something to make the 50th anniversary special memorable, and didn't even bother planning out what they would do with such a huge creative decision.
Okay, so for those of you who are new here, Edward of the three of us is kind of the behind-the-scenes guy who keeps track of like what the actual intent of the writers are at any given moment. So I'm going to need you to confirm right now that that's actually the case.
That's just me being super suspicious, because I don't like giving writers too much credit when it's clear that they don't plan out their stuff that well.
Okay, because sometimes you'll say things about like what the writers had in mind when they were writing a thing, and it's like completely substantiated, and you're like pulling from a source. So I needed you to clarify that wasn't happening this time. But I agree. I can totally understand the mindset that the impetus behind that decision in the first place is like, okay, it's 50th anniversary. What do we have that's like a big thing, that's like a big crowd-pleasing through line that the fan base has been keeping track of since the show came back? And we've only got the one thing, and that's the Time War, so let's resolve that. So yeah, I completely believe you. I completely believe that instinct that like they didn't actually have a plan for anything to do with Gallifrey. They just knew that bringing it back would make people really excited. And granted, it's been 7 years since that happened. It's hard to think about it in those terms, but that was 7 years ago. So I get it. Gallifrey has just been dormant off screen for the most part for 7 years. Why not just blow up again? I don't know. I really got to wait to see how this resolves before I really cast a judgment on it. My hope is that by the end of this, Gallifrey is back again. And I know it's going to feel real cheap to people to have it be back, and then it's gone, and then it's back, and then it's gone again. This is my real problem. My real problem is, I mentioned earlier, I think that we've got a very clear, natural trajectory of a character arc from 9 to 10 to 11 to 12 and now to 13. And 13, part of what I liked about her character and part of what I really appreciated about Series 11 is that she felt like the Doctor who finally got over it. Like, so much of the show since it came back has been predicated on, even after he saved Gallifrey, the Doctor is in this weird emotional place because of the Time War and the cascading effects of what being in that war and being that kind of person did to him. And 13 finally feels like the Doctor who's able to just be in love with life again completely and not have that self-doubt and that survivor's guilt and all of that drama in their head. And now we've just pushed her back to that place. And I really don't like that. A lot of people were like, oh, she hasn't had enough opportunities to be dark and give that kind of performance. And I'm like, I get it. To be fair, we have not talked enough about Jodie Whittaker's performance. I think she's great in these episodes. When she finds Gallifrey like that, and she does have to finally play the Doctor as like really sort of this mix of angry and devastated, she does a great job. I would never have felt the impulse to make her go through that again. I don't like the implication that this Doctor can only sort of do dramatic pathos if it's coming from this really deep, tragic, lost place. Like, I like that she was the Doctor who finally got over it. And now we just did it again. And so the character is right back there, and I don't like that.
Yeah, that's my whole problem. It's just repetitive. I like that they brought, Gallifrey back because there was a lot of story opportunities. I understood that they probably weren't going to do anything at first, and then Moffat just left as a showrunner and left it to the new guy to do what he will. And to me, that his first instinct is to just destroy it again. That's like, he really just had nothing new, really.
And again, the thing is, in the context of the episode, it's great because...
Yeah, in the context of the episode, when they revealed it, I was like, oh, wow, that's shocking. But then I thought about, wait a minute, we done it.
And not even just the shock of it, the fact that the Master did it. Because it's like, again, it's like, oh, man, whatever the heck happened to this guy, whatever this timeless child thing is, it must be a big deal. And RJH Productions, again, is saying, and Hellbent was the perfect opportunity to do something with Gallifrey. Moffat just made it all about Clara. I'm gonna acknowledge RJH's comment, and then I'm gonna move on because we've said a lot about this point. I mean, look how much of a big deal they made out of Gallifrey at the end of Heaven Sent, which was a fantastic story, and then Hellbent. Okay, RJH Productions, you and I are gonna disagree on this point. And at the beginning, like 50 minutes ago, I said I was going to be the guy who would be the voice of positivity amongst the three of us. Maybe it's just me driving so much of this conversation. I'm surprised that you two have been as positive as you have been. Like, you're not, like, loving this episode. I was expecting to, like, come out of this conversation feeling like I was the only one with good things to say. Like, I was emotionally preparing myself to just have to sit through a lot of complaints. And I'm glad that didn't end up having happen.
Well, fine two-parter. It's just the problem is the previous series, in my opinion, did a terrible job establishing this new Doctor and the companions. And I end up not really caring about any of them, so I just shrugged my way through these 2 episodes.
That's understandable. Chibnall's got, like, an approach to characterization that I guess just doesn't work for everybody.
He showrunned the first 2 series of Torchwood, which means he had a big hand in the development of all 5 members.
Yeah, and it's weird because we all have differing opinions on Chibnall's approach to Doctor Who. I feel like there's a lot of similarity in how he's developed this cast of characters and how the main cast of Torchwood developed, which is like, there are a lot of people who are not hot on series 1 and 2 of Torchwood, especially series 1, but looking at it, I feel like I have a sort of approach to character development that just gels with what Chibnall does, and so I read into a lot of things, especially in the episodes that he writes, as far as character development that's really subtextual and like leans on you watching all of the episodes of a series as kind of like separate episodes, but also parts of a whole and stuff like that. And like taking that approach, I really, especially on a rewatch, I really like Ryan and I really like Graham. Yaz, I don't dislike, and we'll see how this series treats her, but I don't know, and I really like 13. So like, they're not my favorites, they're not my favorite Doctor, and they're not my favorite companions, but I don't know, I really like them. So I kind of came in predisposed to being engaged in this episode. I want to acknowledge Robert's point before we talk about the companions, and then we got to move on. So Robert's point about Hellbent, I am one of the few people who will staunchly defend Hellbent.
Me too.
Because I'm in this place where could it have been really interesting if we actually focused on Gallifrey? Maybe. I don't know. I've never seen a Gallifrey-centered episode where Gallifrey was the interesting part of it. I've never seen that happen. So making the ending of Series 9, which is so much about the Doctor and Clara as like this really toxic, harmful, symbiotic relationship that's kind of beautiful and disgusting, and how that's reflected in both of them, and making that the centerpiece of Hellbent as opposed to, oh, hey, Gallifrey's back, that really worked for me. What I would have liked to see happen is after that episode where we establish that Gallifrey is back as a setting, maybe after that we have an episode set on Gallifrey where that's a focus, or bring a Time Lord into an otherwise unrelated episode. You two know this, but in the Series 10 episode, Knock Knock, I had this crazy conspiracy theory that the old dude in that episode was going to be a Time Lord, just because we open that episode talking about Time Lords, and it seems like it comes really out of nowhere, and I'm like, are we building up to introducing another non-Doctor, non-Master Time Lord character in this show finally? I've waited so long for that to happen, and then no, it's just that conversation just had no purpose in that episode, and it's just a really generic haunted house story.
You jumped the gun. You gave the writer of that episode too much credit with just the first 5 seconds to go off of.
That's true, Robert. Deadly Assassin is like the one exception. Because the thing about Gallifrey, because Gallifrey is, again, centered to the plot of this series, I imagine this won't be the first and last time this comes up. I forget who said this. Someone a long time ago said this. It might have been one of the writers, it might have been somebody, but it's like, the point of Gallifrey should be that it's boring, kind of. Because otherwise, why would the Doctor leave? Moffat tried to do this thing where he was constantly trying to pin like more pathological reasons to the Doctor leaving Gallifrey aside from just he's bored. But I kind of like that. I like that for this character. It's just like this setting does not gel with who the Doctor is. And when it is interesting, it's stuff like Mind Warp or the whole Trial of a Time Lord thing, where the great thing about that is like the Sixth Doctor has his great speech where he's like going off and fighting the Daleks and the Cybermen and power-mad conspirators. I should have stayed here. You guys are the real evil of the galaxy. Centuries and millennia of being in a bureaucracy and just this
absolute power.
Yeah, absolute power. They're a bureaucracy. Their way of life is so completely counter to the Doctor's that they're almost totally evil just with how boring and bureaucratic they are. That, I think, could be really interesting and might even be an interesting alternative to just destroying everything. But again, we don't know what the actual reasoning is, so we've got to wait to see how this resolves before we really make heads or tails of anything. I don't know. I'm really torn. Just my big reservation is the Doctor's character thing. And why I want Gallifrey to be back again by the end of this series is I don't want to just do the Doctor's got survivor's guilt and, oh, I'm the last of my species and, oh, man, my home, I can never go back. I don't want to do that again. I like that 13 is the positive Doctor who's finally a complete person.
Like, mention it, like, this is a bit, off or bad.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to condemn anything. I just have serious reservations about making this story choice. Now, finally, at an hour into this discussion, we're going to talk about Ryan and Graham and Yaz and their subplot. Because we mentioned Barton, I got on you for not getting his name right, but I was clarifying. I don't want you to think I have a problem with calling him Steve Jobs because he's boring. I don't like him. It's a waste of Lenny Henry. His whole thing is dumb. Again, it's not dumb from a logistical perspective because again, in real life, DNA as storage for data is a thing that we have tested and proven is possible. The whole thing of just like, oh, your phones, you're so ignorant, we track you through your technology. Like, it's such pedestrian commentary. It's so been there, done that. Sky is not an interesting character. That said, all of the scenes that are centered around Ryan, Graham, and Yaz, I like them a lot. And like I've argued with people on how well defined they are as characters. I like that as a trio, they each kind of fulfill a different purpose, where Yaz is kind of the one who's always asking, what would the doctor be saying right now? What would the doctor be doing? Let's try and take the doctor's approach to this. She's like the second in command, the one who takes charge when the doctor isn't around. Ryan is the one who's a little bit of a defeatist and kind of lets his insecurities get to him. One of my favorite bits in part 1 is him freaking out about like how I chose a spy named Logan. Now I'm worried I don't look anything like Hugh Jackman, and don't panic. I thought rule 1 was don't trust anyone. Rule 1A, don't panic while you're not trusting anyone.
This is the one part we're going to have a bit of negativity, Nick. I'm sorry, but
Go ahead.
As far as the characters go, I love the doctor. I think she's adorable. Every minute she's on screen, I'm just like, oh my god, I love you. I like the master. I think he's super creepy, and all their scenes together I love. But whenever it cuts to the companions, I find Ryan and Yaz so boring, and I find Graham just cringeworthy. I hate him.
Wow.
I said it. I hate you, Graham.
Worst Uber ever.
That is a hot take, that last part.
I think I pissed Robert off. Sorry, Robert, but no.
Graham is always the one that people go to as their favorite. I'm surprised because Robert's sort of like holding of Ryan as least favorite. I'm surprised how common that opinion is, because I find that the people who like Ryan really like him, like me, but most people I hear kind of like dismiss him the most out of the three. I don't want to be mean, but I feel like part of that is Tosin Cole, where I think he is a good actor and he does give good performances, but I think like the nature of his voice or like the nature of some of his line reads, he can be very kind of monotone in a way that the others aren't. And I think that affects the way that people like attach to him. But like people like me who like Ryan tend to like him a lot. So I don't know. Of the three, I kind of like him most. Yaz, again, I mentioned I don't dislike her. I really need, like Manda Gill, especially when Manda Gill gets the chance to act, I think she's really, really, really good. I need her to be given more stuff.
I think she's the best like actor out of the three. My problem is I just find her and Ryan just so bored. I just cannot. Every time they're on screen, it's literally like watching paint dry. I'm sorry, Nick.
You're entitled here. I feel like Edward is going to lean more towards you than me.
Okay. Graham is the best of three companions simply because, while on top of being a terrific actor, I just think Bradley Walsh is given the best material to work with.
They give him all the more funnier lines, but that's kind of the reason I don't like him. I just feel like they're trying to make him like the comedian of the group, and it's just cringeworthy to me.
If I had to describe anyone as the comedian of the group, it would be Ryan.
I just don't have that much to say because this just feels like a repeat of Clara Oswald in Series 7, but multiplied into three separate characters.
See, I don't have that. I think Series 7 Clara is probably the most boring we've ever gotten. Yeah. As far as just, we clearly have not even decided who this person is. Like, part of what makes Clara boring is that she's inconsistent. There's no grounding to even tell who she is. Like, what she likes, what she dislikes, how she acts will change episode to episode in Series 7 if you're paying attention. At least I can say for Ryan, Graham, and Yaz, they all feel like the same people episode to episode. Where, like, the reason I call Ryan the comedian of the group is he's kind of a weirdo. Like, I like that. And I like that it's not in your face. I like that he's just sort of strange. He'll thank himself when he's completely alone. Like, oh, gee, thanks. Like, that was a nice one, Ryan. Gee, thanks, Ryan. Like, there will be exposition going on, and in the background, he'll just be doing shadow puppets. Like, I love all of those little things where it's just like, it's kind of an odd kid. Right now, I feel like we've exhausted all that we have to say about Spyfall. I'm mostly positive, although I have big reservations. I don't do number grades. I don't assign number ratings to episodes. I think it's really dumb. But yeah, I'm generally positive on Spyfall. I think it's a good premiere. Definitely not the best. Nowhere near as good as, say, like Smith and Jones or The 11th Hour. Those are the gold standard for me as far as series openers go. But I think it's serviceable. It's fine. Has a lot of really great moments. I will wait and see how this Gallifrey thing is resolved. But right now, I have serious reservations about that choice. And Chibnall, please, please, please learn how to conclude your stories. You know how to do really good openings and generally good, like, bodies, second acts. You don't know how to write climaxes. Learn how to write a climax, please. That's it. I'm done.
My opinion on it, it was serviceable Doctor Who. It's fine if you don't think about it too hard, but when I start thinking about it more and more, it starts to fall apart. But yeah, it's fine. It's serviceable. I don't like the companions. I love the Doctor. I love the Master. There. And Edward just left.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. I guess he said all he had to say. All right, so we're done. This will be being uploaded to my Ponder channel, and I guess we'll see how it pans out. This is still will be live streamed, so if you want to catch him live, tune in here, and we'll see you later, I guess. Bye-bye.